Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Sarabhyaya Namaha Om Sarabhyaya Namaha Om Sarabhyaya Namaha Mukam Karoti Bangom Langayate Girim Yatkripat Maham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Yatkripat Maham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. Today we are beginning a new canto. New canto means canto number 6. We just finished. Canto number 6. Let's see. Chapter number 1, which is entitled The History of the Life of Ajamil. I will begin with the introduction, which has been summarized here by Srila Prabhupada, and then we'll go to our first verse. So the history of the life of Ajamil. Introduction. Throughout Srimad Bhagavatam there are descriptions of 10 subject matters, including creation, subsequent creation, also known as secondary creation, and the planetary systems. Shukadeva Goswami, the speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam, has already described creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th cantos. Now, in this 6th canto, which consists of 9 chapters, 19 chapters, yes, he will describe Poshana, or protection by the Lord. The first chapter relates the history of Ajamil, who was considered a greatly sinful man, but was liberated when 4 order carriers of Vishnu came to rescue him from the hands of the order carriers of Jamaraj. A full description of how he was liberated, having been relieved of the reactions of his sinful life, is given in this chapter. Sinful activities are painful both in this life and in the next. We should know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. On the path of fruitive work, one certainly commits sinful activities, and therefore, according to the considerations of karmakanda, different types of atonement are recommended. Such methods of atonement, however, do not free one from ignorance, which is the root of sinful life. Consequently, one is prone to commit sinful activities even after atonement, which is therefore very inadequate for purification. On the path of speculative knowledge, one becomes free from sinful life by understanding things as they are. Therefore, the acquirement of speculative knowledge is also considered a method of atonement. While performing fruitive activities, one can become free from the actions of sinful life through austerity, penance, celibacy, control of the mind and senses, truthfulness, and the practice of mystic yoga. By awakening knowledge, one may also neutralize sinful reactions. Neither of these methods, however, can free one from the tendency to commit sinful activities. By bhakti yoga, one can completely avoid the tendency of sinful life. Other methods are not very feasible. Therefore, the Vedic literature concludes that devotional service is more important than the methods of karma kanda and jnana kanda. Only the path of devotional service is auspicious for everyone. Fruitive activities and speculative knowledge cannot independently liberate anyone. But devotional service, independent of karma and jnana, is so potent that one who has fixed his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna is guaranteed not to meet the Yamadutas, the order carriers of Jamaraj, even in dreams. To prove the strength of devotional service, Shukadeva Goswami described the history of Ajamil. Ajamil was a resident of Kanda Bhuja, the modern Kanauj. He was trained by his parents to become a perfect Brahmana by studying the Vedas and following the regulative principles. But because of his past, this youthful Brahmana was somehow attracted by a prostitute, and because of her association he became most fallen and abandoned all regulative principles. Ajamil begot in the womb of the prostitute 10 sons, the last of whom was called Narayana. At the time of Ajamil's death, when the order carriers of Jamaraj came to take him, he loudly called the name Narayana in fear because he was attached to his youngest son. Thus he remembered the original Narayana, Lord Vishnu. Although he did not chant the holy name of Narayana completely offenselessly, it acted nevertheless. As soon as he chanted the holy name of Narayana, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu immediately appeared on the scene. A discussion ensued between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Jamaraj. And by hearing that discussion, Ajamil was liberated. He could then understand the bad effects of fruitive activities and could also understand how exalted is the process of devotional service. Sri Parikshit Uvacha Nivritti Margaha Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yo Palabdhena Brahmana Yad Asamsritihi Sri Parikshit Uvacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Rama Yogo Palabdhena Brahmana Yad Asamsritaha Sri Parikshit Uvacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Rama Yoyo Balabdena Brahmana Yad Samsritihi Sri Parikshit Uvacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Brahma Yogo Palabdhena Brahmana Yad Samsritihi
Sri Parikshit Uvacha
Sri Parikshit Uvacha
Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogo Palabdena Brahmana Yad असंश्रुतिः
ब्रह्मणायदसंस्कृतिः
श्री परीक्षित उवाच
श्रीपरीक्षित उवाच
निवृत्तिमार्गकथिता आदौ भगवता
अदौ भगवता यदा
कर्मयोगोपलब्धेन
रामयोगोपलब्धेन
ब्रह्मणायदसंस्कृता
श्री परीक्षित उवाच
श्रीपरीक्षित उवाच
निवृत्तिमार्गः कथिता आदौ भागवता यथा
अदौ भगवता यदा
कर्मयोगोपलब्धेन
ब्राह्मणायदसंस्कृतिः श्री परीक्षित उवाच Maharaj Parikshit said, Nivritti Marga, the path of liberation, Adau, in the beginning, Bhagavata, by your holiness, Yatha, duly, Krama, gradually, Yoga Upalabdhena, obtained by the yoga process, Brahmana, along with Lord Brahma, after reaching Brahmaloka, yet, by which way? Asamsritihi, cessation of the repetition of birth and death. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Maharaj Parikshit said, O my Lord, O Shukadeva Goswami, you have already described in the second canto the path of liberation, Nivritti Marga. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus, one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases. Kindly repeat after me. Maharaj Parikshit said, O my Lord, O Shukadeva Goswami, you have already described in the second canto the path of liberation, Nivritti Marga. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus, one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases. Purport. Since Maharaj Parikshit was a Vaishnava, when he heard the description at the end of the fifth canto of the different hellish conditions of life, he was very much concerned with how to liberate the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya and take them back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, he reminded his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami, about the Nivritti Marga, or path of liberation, which he had described in the second canto. Maharaj Parikshit, who at the time of death, was fortunate to have met Shukadeva Goswami, inquired from Shukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation at that crucial time. Shukadeva Goswami very much appreciated his question and congratulated him by saying, Varyanesha te prashna kritolo kahitam nripa atmavit samata pumsam srotavyadishu yaparaha. My dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial for all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing and it is approved by all transcendentalists from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 2, Chapter 1, Text 1. Maharaj Parikshit was astonished that the living entities in the conditional stage do not accept the path of liberation, devotional service, instead of suffering in so many hellish conditions. This is the symptom of a Vaishnava. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha. A Vaishnava is an ocean of mercy. Paradukka dukkhi. He is unhappy because of the unhappiness of others. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj, being compassionate toward the conditioned souls suffering in hellish life, suggested that Shukadeva Goswami continue describing the path of liberation, which he explained in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The word samsriti is very important in this connection. Samsriti refers to continuing on the path of birth and death. Asamsriti, on the contrary, refers to Nivritti Marga, or the path of liberation, by which one's birth and death cease, and one gradually progresses to Brahmaloka. Unless one is a pure devotee who does not care about going to the higher planetary systems, in which case one immediately returns home, back to Godhead, by executing devotional service. Tyaktva deham punar janma naiti. Parikshit Maharaj therefore was very eager to hear from Shukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation for the conditioned soul. According to the opinion of the Acharyas, the word krama yogo palabdhena indicates that by first performing karma yoga and then jnana yoga and finally coming to the platform of bhakti yoga, one can be liberated. Bhakti yoga, however, is so powerful that it does not depend on karma yoga or jnana yoga. Bhakti yoga itself is so powerful that even an impious man with no assets in karma yoga or an illiterate with no assets in jnana yoga can undoubtedly be elevated to the spiritual world if he simply adheres to bhakti yoga. Mam vivaishasi samshaya. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 8:7 that by the process of bhakti yoga, one undoubtedly goes back to Godhead, back home to the spiritual world. Yogis, however, instead of going directly to the spiritual world, sometimes want to see other planetary systems, and therefore they ascend to the planetary system where Lord Brahma lives, as indicated here by the word Brahmana. At the time of dissolution, Lord Brahma, along with all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka, goes directly to the spiritual world. This is confirmed in the Vedas as follows. Brahmana sahat sarve samprapte pratisanchare parasyanti kritat mana pravishanti padam padam. Because of their exalted position, those who are on Brahmaloka at the time of dissolution go directly back home, back to Godhead, along with Lord Brahma. Translation again. Maharaj Parikshit said, O my Lord, O Shukadeva Goswami, you have already described in the second canto the path of liberation, Nivritti Marga. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases. So as mentioned in the introduction, before this verse, the introduction of this chapter, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how there are altogether 10 different subject matters in the Bhagavatam, and that in the previous cantos, previous to this 6th canto, topics have already been discussed regarding primary creation, secondary creation, and then various planetary systems. And this 6th canto will be discussing on the topic of protection by the Lord. In Sanskrit, that is Poshana. So a number of important points are being made here. One of them being that one of the special qualities, foremost quality actually, of a Vaishnava, such as Parikshit Maharaj, is his concern for the welfare and protection of the conditioned living entities in the material world. Prabhupada explains actually it is natural when we see someone in danger, we have a tendency to help that person. Of course, Prabhupada also explains that in Kali Yuga, due to so many sinful activities, that what is meant to be a natural tendency to help others who are in distress, and he gives the example of in major cities like New York, and it's true. We have personal experience as well. Even if somebody is in distress, people will just walk by because they have no time or because they don't want to get involved, so many reasons. So this natural tendency of compassion has dwindled considerably in Kali Yuga. It is one of the 4 pillars of Dharma. Satyam Daya Tapasocham Daya. Daya means compassion. Caring for the actual welfare of others. Of course, in the world today there have always been various initiatives, various organizations to somewhat alleviate the distress or the suffering of others. Different welfare activities, such as building hospitals or giving food to others, etc. But the real welfare is only known to a few. The real welfare activity, the highest welfare activity, is to actually give transcendental knowledge on how one can put a final end, complete end to one's suffering in the material world. One's suffering in the material world is the continuous repetition of birth and death. And this is nicely explained here by Srila Prabhupada, how there are so many different processes that are recommended in the Shastra. References given to activities of karma kanda and jnana kanda, performing different activities or cultivating some knowledge, but the recommended process and the only process which can actually situate one on the platform where one will no longer have to return to this material world is this very process of bhakti yoga, which is referred to, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita as here also referred, nivritti marga, pravritim cha, nivritim cha, janana vidur asura. So it is explained in this verse from Bhagavad Gita, these are the two ways, two activities, path of pravriti and nivritti. Pravriti means engaging in activities generally of sense gratification. Nivritti marga means giving up all activities on the bodily platform or on the mental platform. And this is what is binding us in the material world. Naturally we are connected with this body. We are connected with our material senses and with our material mind and our material intelligence. But one who is fortunate to receive this knowledge, transcendental knowledge from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, understands that actually whatever I may attempt to do on that material level, because it is all material, will be binding me to this material world. Will actually be the cause of my continued suffering in the material world. And therefore, one is recommended to rise above these levels of material sense gratification or mental speculation and adopt the process of bhakti or devotional service. So this is a brief introduction to this story of Ajamil, who we get a little glimpse here. Although material world is so dangerous, in a Brahmana family. Ajamil was a Brahmana. He was the son of a Brahmana. He went to Gurukul. He received training, and he was duly married. So that means he spent many years performing righteous activities. But the material world is so dangerous that due to association, bad association, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that even one sense that is not controlled, in this case, his eyesight wandered and he became attracted to the activities of low-class people engaged in activities of sense gratification. So therefore the importance of controlling, as the whole Vedic culture is based on regulation. How to become regulated from very early life. Tapasya brahmacharyena samena cha damena cha. From brahmachari life actually is meant for that purpose. Therefore, in Kali Yuga, because most people do not have that good fortune of getting brahmachari training. Therefore, from very early life, young people, especially nowadays, are totally undisciplined and take up to all kinds of bad habits from very early age. And this spoils their opportunity actually for for putting an end to their suffering in the material world. Rather, such activities of sense gratification, which are very widely being promoted. In modern day materialistically oriented society. And therefore, as nicely explained by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, spiritual life means giving up such kind of activities of sense gratification, such types of association. Therefore, asat sanga tyaga e vaishnavacha sri sangi eka sadhu Krishna abhakta. So a devotee is someone who is conscious of the need and the importance of guarding oneself, of regulating how to guard ourselves from such bad association, how to guard ourselves from sinful activities, is by becoming regulated. That is the whole description given in the Nectar of Devotion by Srila Rupa Goswami. That is called sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti. And a very important part of sadhana bhakti, every day actually one should be conscious of the need to be regulated. When we look and study the lives of great personalities, one devotee was having that wonderful realization of how Srila Prabhupada was very regulated. You know, every day at a certain time he would do the same thing. He would rise early, he would be doing his translation at a certain time. Every time of the day. This is a common feature that we see in all the lives of great personalities. We read also about Srila Thakur. They were very, practically to the second. They were like very, very serious about properly using their time. This is also nicely described by Srila Rupa Goswami. The symptom or the characteristic of someone who's advanced in Krishna consciousness, he doesn't like to lose time. He knows how time is very precious, because we don't know how long we are here in the material world. Everyone is thinking that, well, later on maybe, when I get older. And in India, that's the general recommendation. You take to spiritual life when you're older, not now. Don't become too serious about spiritual life. You can do a few little things, that's okay, but don't become too serious. Don't take it too seriously. But no, we should take it seriously. We don't know how long we have in this particular body. It is all already decided and ordained by the laws of karma, by providence. It's not only old people who die. Young people die also. You see. So Vedic culture is driving home this point that from very early life one should take to Krishna consciousness. Again and again Prabhupada is reminding us of this, because at least one who takes to Krishna consciousness from earlier life, and this is the case of Ajamil, because of having practiced in his earlier life, although the rest of his life, from the age of 20 approximately till very old age, he was He was 87, I believe. And he was 87, and how old was his son? 3 or 4. Young boy, his 10th son. So if his son was, let's say, 3 years old, and he was 87, that means that at 84 is still caught up with sex life. Means sense gratification, as Prabhupada explains also, is the tendency for sense gratification is there as long as we have this material body. Till the very moment we leave this body. And Prabhupada, I'm sure you've all heard that example, that that was one of the questions that a king was asking his minister, and the minister told him, actually, sex attraction is there till the very last moment of our life. The minister was telling, and the king didn't believe him. No, I don't believe that. You know, people will get old. Their interest for sex life will stop. The minister said, no. He said, I don't believe you. You come, I will prove to you. And then he brought him, as we know, to one place where there was an old man about to die, actually. And the minister had told, you get ready anytime, I will call you. We have to come very quickly. He told, and when you come, you have to bring your daughter, your young daughter. So the day came, minister came, okay, time has come, you come immediately. They all went, they rushed to that place, and they entered the room. Before entering the room, the minister told the king, when we will enter the room, there is one old man, he's about to die. You keep your eyes on his eyes. When you enter the room, you keep an eye on his eyes. You're the king. He should be looking at you because you're the king, no? But you just watch his eyes, he'll be looking at your daughter. He has no interest in you. Because he's still on the bodily platform. So sure enough, the king entered with his young daughter. As they approached the bed, the old man, his eyes were half closed, and then as soon as he saw somebody was approaching, he looked up and immediately looked at the daughter. Yeah. So, sense gratification is very, very strong, prominent. Why it is like that? Because by nature we are we are meant to be happy. We are meant to actually enjoy. Prabhupada would sometimes explain that the goal of life actually, or the purpose of life, this is how he replied one time to a newspaper reporter, purpose of life is to enjoy. Because by nature, living entity, spirit soul, is having this natural quality of enjoying. Satchit Ananda. Krishna is Satchit Ananda. Vigraha. And we are also of the same nature. And when that nature, that nature means that spiritual nature is not awakened, then we are seeking, we are forced, practically speaking. That's what Krishna explains to Arjuna. Arjuna is asking that question, what is forcing, practically forcing us to engage in activities of sense gratification, even against our will? Then Krishna replies, Kama isha, Krodha isha. It is Kama, it is lust. Lust, which is that perverted reflection of the original feeling, of the original tendency, of the original desire within all of us. So if we don't use it for Krishna, we have to use it for Maya. If we're not engaged in serving Krishna, we will be engaged in serving Maya, in serving our material senses, in serving our material lust. So this is the beginning of this very nice story, and we are being reminded here. I mean, most people are not even aware that there is this other level of existence, or the actual reality. The real world is not this material world. The real world is beyond the material world, is the spiritual world. And we can only put an end to our suffering when we find the process or the method or the way how to go back to that spiritual world. And that, of course, is only the process. The whole Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita also is stressing on the unique feature of Bhakti Yoga. Only by Bhakti Yoga we can actually completely put an end to our karma. We can put an end to our attraction to this material world, because we are able to gradually develop our attraction to Krishna. If we don't develop our attraction to Krishna, because by nature we have to be attracted. We are attracted to something, to someone. So if that attraction to Krishna is not evoked, is not developed, then we'll be attracted to something else. Therefore, the process of regular association of all the activities that are recommended, association in terms of hearing, association in terms of exchanging, interacting with devotees, with those who are endeavoring to cultivate this knowledge. So this is a very unusual and extraordinary story of this personality, Ajamil. Of course, devotees have heard, but we need to remind ourselves how by performing good activities means especially activities of devotional service, then even in a critical position or condition in which Ajamil found himself, because of his being connected with even such a word as Narayana, then he received the mercy of the Lord, and the agents of Lord Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas, they came to his rescue. Of course, this will gradually be explained in this chapter. I'll read the verse again. And so Maharaj Parikshit said, "O my Lord, O Shukadeva Goswami, you have already described in the second canto the path of liberation, Nivritti Marga. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the higher planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world, along with Lord Brahma. Thus one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases." Prabhupada does mention in the purport that sometimes yogis, they want to visit different planets, just like sometimes in the material world we want to go. I've never been to London, let me go to London. I've never been to, let me go to Disneyland, you know. People go to America to go to see Disneyland. So there are many such kind of Disneylands in the material world, so many other attractive features. But devotees have, once we cultivate nicely this process of bhakti, we have no interest to see anything else, because we've heard about the most attractive feature which is not in the material world, that is the abode or residence of Lord Krishna in the spiritual world. So we are simply interested in going back to Goloka Vrindavan, bypassing completely so many other planets and whatnot. So any comments or questions on this?
Maharaj,
Yes.
Parikshit Maharaj mentioned in this purpose. One is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world, along with Lord Brahma.
Yes.
That one repetition of the birth and death is material world is. In Bhagavad Gita, Abrahma Bhuna Loka Punaravartino Arjuna, Krishna says now.
Yes.
This is saying they will elevated to the highest planet, Krishna Loka. How it is?
So here it mentions that it is only at the end of the life of Lord Brahma, those who are fortunate to have, even in the heavenly planet, to have practiced bhakti yoga. Lord Brahma, just like our Lord Brahma, is a pure devotee. He wasn't always a pure devotee. So when one becomes a pure devotee, regardless of where one is situated, those who are associating with him will also get a chance to practice bhakti. And otherwise people come back. As long as that Lord Brahma is not completely perfect, those who are with him, they'll have to come back. So those who are fortunate to be with a Lord Brahma, it is to be understood that Lord Brahma, by the end of his life, just like for us also, before the end of our life, we'll come to Krishna consciousness. So it's not a contradiction. Bhagavad Gita says, as you quite clearly mentioned a few seconds ago, how Krishna himself explains that from the highest planet to the lowest planet, all are places of birth and death, repeated birth and death, and one has to generally come back to the material world, or to this planet rather. But those who are very pious and may not know, this is for those who are still not knowing about Bhakti Yoga. They will be elevated, Prabhupada mentions here. Our yogis, they may be elevated to some of these planets, and if they're fortunate to be elevated to Brahmaloka, where that Brahmaloka is has become a pure devotee, then all of those persons on that planet of Brahmaloka, naturally, they will be following, because they will accept Lord Brahma as their leader. They will take shelter of him. He will train them into devotional service. They will go back home, back to Godhead.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other? Yes.
As soon as we start service to Krishna,
Huh?
as soon as we begin our service to Krishna,
As soon as we begin our service to Krishna,
and we will be able to conquer the lust gradually.
will we be able to conquer the lust gradually? I hope so.
Because even coming to bhakti, still
Yes,
lust is still.
yes, because that lust, this kama, is so deeply within each and every one of us. But anyone who has begun the process and continues the process, that will gradually be eliminated. That will gradually be eliminated. So it depends on how one takes the process seriously. The more seriously we take up the process, then it can be done more quickly. It can be done within lifetime. Prabhupada says you can become a pure devotee within 1 second. What to speak of a lifetime? Even within 1 second. If one It's a question of simply fully surrendering. Of course, that is easy to say, as they say, easier said than done. But that is the statement that is there in the Shastra. It is explained by Srila Rupa Goswami that anyone who begins a process is already considered liberated, although one is not immediately, but one is on the path of liberation. So it is simply a question of continuing and applying the process, very similar to someone who is diseased. He takes a medicine, follows a diet. If he has a good doctor, then he will gradually become healthy. We have the best doctor. We have many doctors. All of our acharyas are doctors, and of course the supreme doctor, the supreme Lord is himself the best physician. And so if we simply stick to the process, then it is guaranteed that as we increase our attraction to Krishna, we will naturally decrease our attraction and our attachment. So that's nicely stated also in the first canto of the Bhagavatam. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayad Ahaitukam. By the process of bhakti to Vasudeva, Krishna, then the effect will be that one will gain causeless knowledge and causeless detachment. Gradually become more and more detached, gradually become more and more knowledgeable about Krishna consciousness. So yeah.
I have some questions, but I don't want everyone to hear. It's like,